very specifically, we asked our residents not to participate in counter protest. We asked our residents, not even the regional residents and their county executives and leaders asked them not to participate in counter protest. And I know for a lot of people, I've gotten text messages, that was a hard thing to do because they wanted to fight back. But just imagine if our police had to also police protest against the people who sieged the Capitol. So it was very important that the police could focus on them. So we're going to continue to ask our residents to listen to our guidance, but go about your lives. DC government, we're already on modified operations because of COVID, but our facilities that are having in-person activities continue to do so.
Mayor Bowser, how upset does it make you to see the federal response on Black Lives Matter Plaza during the protests there and around Juneteenth, and then see yesterday? By comparison, you mentioned that earlier. How upset does it make you?
What I'm upset about, I'm upset about what this president has done to our city and our democracy. I'm not prone to wild swings of emotion because we have some work to do to find out what happened to make sure it doesn't happen again. And that's my job right now. And that's the job of everybody here. I'm upset that my police officers were put in harm's way when they were just doing their jobs. And I'm even upset that somebody died in that building who was breaking into the building. We should all be upset about all of those things. I am heartened that our police and guards people were able to get control of the building and that our lawmakers went back into that building to vote. I'm upset that 706,000 residents of the District of Columbia did not have a single vote in that Congress yesterday, despite the fact that our people were putting their lives on the line to protect our democracy.
How slow did
that is how upset we all should be.
How slow did things move yesterday? I mean, that must upset you that there wasn't a more ratcheted up response, specifically at the Capitol, but then Secretary McCarthy yesterday spoke about a delay of getting federal forces into the district. How would you classify it?
I've classified it already. I think that a more robust presence on the grounds of the Capitol would have prevented people from getting into the building. Yes.
Fox 5 DC. Mayor, it's one thing to have a more robust presence on the ground, but when we have Capitol Police just seemingly letting people inside, I was there seeing them letting out, and then to hear that we only have 13 arrests for unlawful entry. It's one thing to have several officers on the ground, but what do we do if they're not as effective as possibly should be?
I think you've laid out another question that it will be subject to investigation. I think that's an important question. We not only need people, we need effective deployment of those people. Yes.
Mayor, what do you, Sam Ford with Channel 7. Mayor, what do you all know about these groups like Proud Boys, QAnon, militia group? Were they involved in this, and are they among the people arrested?
I don't know that we can say that right now, Chief.
Yeah, I don't know that we can say that right now. I think it's safe to say that, we had certainly people who were like-minded with all the rhetoric that has been going on that did what they did at the U.S. Capitol yesterday. But beyond that, I won't give credit to any particular group.
What were the injury numbers, Chief?
For our police officers, initially we were at 14 initially, but that number went up to about 56 over the course of the night. And I got to tell you, there was a lot of valiant fighting by the members of the Metropolitan Police Department there. At one point, several officers, as a result of munitions and pepper spray and tear gas, being able to step off the line, be triaged quickly and back on the line to try to ensure the safety and security of our Capitol building. So just a tremendous amount of heroic acts. I have one officer who's still in the hospital right now. He was snatched into a crowd. He was beaten. He was kicked. He was tased several times. So, yeah, they fought. They fought very hard yesterday.
56 MPD officers.
That's correct, sir.
Yes.
A clarification on the arrests. I'm seeing that 25 arrests were made for curfew violations and unlawful entry on the Capitol grounds. I'm wondering if there were any arrests made just for unlawful entry on the Capitol grounds, or if all of those arrested were in curfew violation.
So all the arrests that occurred after 6 p.m., the initial group of 25 or 26, whatever it was, those arrests were right on the Capitol grounds. This was after the mayor's curfew was in effect. We gave the order. Individuals were still there, which we're required to do. We gave the order. Individuals were still there, and we placed those individuals who were there, we placed them under arrest. MPD was able to do that. So that was really kind of the balance. And the goal was for us, as we were able to secure the perimeter and have a strong perimeter, to make arrests and then start working our way out. The balance of that was as MPD members worked through the streets of the District of Columbia to ensure the safety and security of our businesses and residents, especially in the immediate areas surrounding the Capitol and some of the areas where we know that some of the people that were involved in this were congregating. MPD members were able to make additional arrests over the course of the night.
So there were no arrests made for those who unlawfully entered the Capitol building until 6 p.m.?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay, and then I think people are a little confused at just the low numbers of arrests that were made. There's videos of hundreds of people coming into the Capitol. Can you explain a little bit why those numbers are so low? What happens? Did people leave? Is this an issue of not having enough people to manage it?
No, sure. I can tell you, I mean, probably not many people in this room have been in the midst of a riot or an insurgence like that. And the first thing that you have to do is to regain control. You have to establish control of the situation that was going on. The men and women of the Metropolitan Police Department went into a situation that was already out of control. So once control was established and that perimeter was established, then and only then are we able to safely make arrests. Because as you begin to make arrests, now we get into additional use of forces, additional injuries of officers, and potential additional injuries of the people that we intend on arresting. We have a responsibility to ensure the safety and security, abide by the Constitution and all of that. And we intended to do that. So we made the arrests that we made in front of the Capitol. After that, we went forward and we made additional arrests, and we will continue to work with our federal partners. There are a lot of people that are on the that we have listed on our website. There are a lot of people that are in these images, and we know that there are people across this country who can identify these individuals. This is where the community comes in and help. These are clear images. Some of these images, there's no mistake about who some of these people are. So we're asking our communities to call in, whether it's a community here in the District of Columbia or as far as West Coast, it really doesn't matter. Call into your local FBI office, identify who these individuals are, and let's hold them accountable.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Ashraf Khalil with the Associated Press. Mayor Bowser, if you were a governor, how would yesterday have gone differently for you? What would you have been able to do differently, and on what kind of a timeline?
The difference would be when we become the 51st state, or before then. Our Congresswoman has a bill in the Congress right now to give the mayor control of the D.C. National Guard. What's different is we would not make a request to the Secretary of the Army for guards support. We would not be restricted in any way from how to deploy the guard, so we wouldn't have to clear a deployment plan with the Secretary of the Army. We could be nimble in how we change it. If we have a deployment plan that was approved, for example, that limited the guard to the traffic box or to 9th Street, if we find out during the course of the response that needs to change dramatically, then I, as mayor/governor, would make that determination. That's the big difference. What wouldn't be different as governor would be my ability to put the National Guard on the Capitol steps. I wouldn't be able to do that as governor, nor would I be able to use our state police on the grounds of the Capitol. That wouldn't be different either. Yes, and we're going to take one more round, and then we're going to wrap up. Yep.
Sure. I want to address some images that were going around on social media of some of the protesters and rioters celebrating indoors at the Alibi Bar, as well as the lobbies of some hotels across town, packed into crowds, not wearing masks. What is going to be done? What kind of fines are going to come to these businesses? I realize that the hotels can be a trickier situation, but with the Alibi, that is a bar that allowed for indoor dining, indoor drinking. What's going to be done with that?
We'll have to investigate that. I saw one, for example, when we were driving around where that was the case. There may be hotel guests, and we will see what violations of their business license occurred. Any other? Yes, Mark.
Question for you, Mayor, and a question for the two gentlemen. Mayor, and I know you've been asked this in one way before, but what is your fear, after seeing what we saw yesterday, what is your fear that could happen on January 20th, and what steps might you take that we haven't seen thus far that you might be considering to maintain the peace? And do you think there should be a public ceremony?
Well, Mark, I think that we're obviously concerned about the 20th. We're concerned about the days leading up to the 20th. But I think we as Americans have to also ask ourselves, is this going to be a new normal in America? Regardless of if Donald Trump is the president, are people still going to be inspired to violence and to try to overthrow institutions of our government? So I think that frame for everybody has to reset, because it may not end on the 20th. And so that, for us, as we think about it as the nation's capital, that means a whole different level of policing. I sit before you right now with a force that's 3,700 strong, but shrinking. I sit before you with local laws that affect how we approach First Amendment demonstrations that may turn to riots. I sit before you with a $100 million bill that the federal government owes us from the last 4 years of helping the federal government police First Amendment demonstrations that are increasing in number and complexity. So all of those things as we move forward, not just for the 20th, but as the mayor, the chief executive of the nation's capital, host to the federal government with a force that supports federal forces, we have a lot to think about if this is going to be a new normal in America.
If I could just follow with the chief and the secretary about intelligence. What can you tell us about the intelligence you had leading up to yesterday? And was there any intelligence that suggested that there would be an attempted breach of the U.S. Capitol?
There was no intelligence that suggested there would be a breach of the U.S. Capitol. The intelligence leading up to that, we won't talk specifically about the intelligence that we had, but we anticipated certainly that there would be an increased number of people into our city. In comparison to the previous two demonstrations, we certainly knew that. But in addition to that, the Metropolitan Police Department, under the mayor's leadership, not only did we activate the National Guard, but we also initiated mutual aid with several area law enforcement agencies before yesterday. So I think that that's a really important note to make in terms of our preparation for this. So based on the intelligence, not only did we have the National Guard, but we had the National Guard and we had mutual aid services for D.C. residents, for Washington. I mean, that's really, really, really important. So I'll leave it right there.
And that was why Chief Conte requested us to support traffic control points at 30 separate locations on the north side of the city to prevent vehicular movement. We're still performing that mission. I was remiss not to mention at the beginning, we have 850 on the Capitol grounds as well as 90 additional personnel, 3 per location at traffic control points, largely on the north side of the city from about 9th to 17th in Northwest. With respect to the posture leading in, We receive our intelligence from law enforcement agencies, whether they're federal or local. There was the going in position that it would be somewhat similar to November 14th, December 12th, where the types of groups that were there, but had no wildest imagination that you could end up breaching the Capitol grounds.
Okay, that's our update. Thank you, everybody.
Can I ask you who you record and why you record in here?
Doing. NBC terrorism analyst Jim Kavanaugh and NBC Justice correspondent Pete Williams. Gentlemen, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Well, the United States is usually a beacon of democracy. Today, that beacon looks more like a distress signal. Hey there, I'm Joshua Johnson. It's good to be with you from wherever you are around the world on NBC News Now. The Capitol is now a crime scene. Investigators are collecting bullet fragments and cigarette butts as evidence after a mob stormed the complex. Congress formally ended the presidential race, accepting the Electoral College votes and declaring Joe Biden the winner. We are live on Capitol Hill. Washington and the world are reacting to this riot. President-elect Biden is calling on America to step up. President Trump now claims that there will be an orderly transition of power. We will see how global leaders are condemning the violence and distancing themselves from Mr. Trump. And the president's rhetoric festered on social media. It fueled conspiracy theories and insurrection. This morning, Facebook announced that it is blocking his account for the rest of his term, at least. What's happened online? And what will social networks do now? This will be a busy day, so we hope you take us with you on the go on the Peacock app, the NBC News app, or online at NBCNewsNow.com. Well, this morning, President Trump finally stated that there would indeed be an orderly transition of power. That statement did not include conceding defeat. To the contrary, it did include the same false assertion that victory was stolen from him. The statement reads in part, quote, "Even though I totally disagree with the outcome of the election and the facts bear me out, nevertheless, there will be an orderly transition on January 20th, unquote. To be clear, again, the facts do not bear him out. There is no proof that this election was rigged. NBC White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell joins us now from Washington. And Kelly, the president released that statement through his deputy chief of staff instead of his own Twitter account, because Twitter also temporarily blocked his account over his reactions to the chaos at the Capitol. Today, Facebook and Instagram, which is owned by Facebook, announced that they're blocking him, quote, until a peaceful transition of power is complete, unquote. What's the mood like at the White House, particularly in terms of what we might hear from the president after a number of fairly high-profile resignations and perhaps more to come?
Well, it's certainly a stressful time at the White House, and the president put out that statement through his aide. He has not put it out through the normal channels of releasing an official White House statement, which would be more formal, more historic, more permanent. And that, in a way, sort of shades the statement to making it less official. Now, certainly it was the words attributed to the president, but he has not taken more opportunities today to try to communicate to the public, which he could do at any time. There's a pool available to him of journalists of all different types, print and radio and television, who could be witnesses to anything he wants to say, and he has not done that yet. We do know that there is a Medal of Freedom ceremony happening where the president is awarding 3 of those highest civilian honors to golfers, 2 who are, we believe, present, a third is a posthumous award. And that is something that the White House says had been in the works and was delayed due to COVID-related restrictions. And so they're doing it now, limited time left on the schedule. But that's the kind of event that would typically be celebratory, would have a public component. The president's not doing that. It also comes at a time when there is growing criticism among certainly other elected officials in both parties about what he said or did not say, calls for him to step down or be removed through the use of the 25th Amendment. And there are these notable resignations, including most recently Matthew Pottinger, who has been a top official at the National Security Council and was a major official involved in the time periods where the president was engaged in diplomacy with North Korea and Kim Jong-un. Pottinger has a lot of background in that area in particular, and he is stepping down. In addition, we've seen a couple of officials in senior positions with the First Lady's office, a deputy press secretary, and we've also seen Mick Mulvaney, who held 3 different roles within the Trump White House, most recently as the envoy to Northern Ireland. But remember, he'd also been the budget director and the acting chief of staff. So very prominent in the Trump orbit at that time, and he has withdrawn. So there is a lot of pressure on the president to say more and to do more. But so far, and it has been a chaotic 24 hours to be sure, he has not taken advantage of any opportunity to do more or say more. What he left us with is this willingness to have an orderly transfer of power. That is a positive sign to try to quell any ongoing unrest. But he also, in his video message, spoke about his affection for those who turned up at the Capitol and caused all that damage, saying that they are loved and special people. Joshua?
Kelly, briefly before I let you go, there's been talk of invoking the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump. The editorial board of the Washington Post wrote a piece calling for that. To make that happen, the vice president and the majority of the cabinet would have to agree to that. Is that actually being discussed in any real way, or is that just talk for now?
Based on our reporting, it has been discussed at a staff level, which is notable in and of itself, but it has not, to our knowledge, ratcheted up to being an active conversation among cabinet members or with the vice president directly. So that would be certainly something of this import, and it hasn't been used in this way to remove a president. It has been used when a president was under anesthesia for surgery and was passing the powers to a vice president for a temporary period. But this would be an enormous historic earthquake. And at this point, staff level discussion alone is certainly noteworthy. We don't know if it will go beyond that. Joshua?
So much happened yesterday just over your shoulder between the White House and the Washington Monument. What a difference a day makes. Thank you, Kelly. That's NBC White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell. It was almost 4 a.m. Washington time today when Congress confirmed Joe Biden's win. This after a day of insurrection at the Capitol. Pro-Trump rioters broke into the building after President Trump egged them on at that rally that morning. 4 people have died. Senators and representatives and aides and journalists all evacuated the Senate and the House. It all went down shortly after Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell issued this warning.
If this election were overturned by mere allegations from the losing side, our democracy would enter a death spiral. we'd never see the whole nation accept an election again.
Now let's continue with NBC's Leanne Caldwell on Capitol Hill. First of all, Leanne, tell us what you've seen today, particularly in contrast to what you saw yesterday when you were in lockdown.
Hey, Joshua. So, yeah, today is much calmer compared to yesterday. Every day is much calmer compared to yesterday. But what is happening today is there are lots of remains and reminders of what happened yesterday inside the Capitol building, a building full of history and art and, just timeless pieces of our country's history, a beacon of democracy. And what you see now is all of that's covered in the film, like the remnants of tear gas and this thick dust. You see broken glass throughout the Capitol, bullet holes through some of the glass doors to get into the Capitol, people's items left behind like scarves and cigarette butts, and it's just trashed, honestly. It's really just trashed. So, we had so many questions about what sort of investigation is happening, what sort of, are they collecting this these items as evidence? And we finally got our first statement from Capitol Police this morning, who was wondering, who we have been asking many questions about what are you guys doing to give the country more information about this? And they finally put out a little slice of what they saw. And they did say that one woman was killed at the hands of a Capitol police officer. That police officer has been suspended or put on administrative leave for the time being. Talked about two explosive devices outside the Capitol complex that could have done serious harm. The hazmat team came and dismantled them. There's also a suspicious vehicle as well. Some, very harsh words also from the head of the Capitol Police saying that this was not a First Amendment. This was not a protest. In fact, this is riotous activity. This is criminal activity. As far as people they have arrested, it says that they have arrested so far 14 people who were inside the Capitol. We expect that number to grow, but that's the number that stands right now, Joshua.
We should also be clear, Leanne, for those of you watching around the world, they're absolutely correct. The First Amendment does not protect protests that turn violent, certainly not protests that break into the Capitol. So if this turns into a free speech argument going down the line, you can smack that down very quickly. Violence is not protected by the First Amendment. In terms of what happens next, Leanne, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer put out a statement calling for the invocation of the 25th Amendment to remove the president right away. Absent that, he called for Congress to hold another impeachment proceeding against President Trump. What's the political appetite for that? I'm sure there are many people in Congress who are slowly getting emboldened enough to say, no, Mr. President, you did this.
Yeah, so before the Senate Democratic leader Schumer put out that statement just about an hour ago, there were more than 100 members of Congress who have come out and said that they want the president to be removed through the 25th Amendment. But no member of leadership had done so yet. So the fact that Schumer came out is pretty important, that the head of the Democratic Party in the Senate is calling for the president to be removed in one of two ways that are possible: through the 25th Amendment as cabinet secretaries or through impeachment. We have not heard from Pelosi yet, Speaker Pelosi, though she is holding a news conference in about half an hour, and we can be sure that this is going to be a question to her. She might just announce something similar. It would be weird if Schumer went ahead of Pelosi and without her. They usually work on something this big in tandem. But as far as Democrats are concerned, they are outraged, they are furious, and they think that this is the only answer. There's one Republican so far who has also come out in favor of the 25th Amendment. That's Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. He has been very, very critical of the president throughout in the post-election period. And then we just also heard from an independent, a former Republican who turned independent, Justin Amash. Of course, he has actually just left office. He didn't run for re-election because of that move, because he was so unhappy with the party and unhappy with the president. So, the Democrats are clear where they stand. Some Republicans are too, but there's also some Republicans who are also trying to blame Antifa and the left for this violence. And, I just have to say that is absolutely false. On one of the stickers that there's evidence of it not being Antifa all through the Capitol. One of the bullet-ridden doors that I saw, 3 stickers are on there. 2 of them say F Antifa, and the other has a picture of Joe Biden that says Joe Biden is not my president. So, those conspiracy theories that are being peddled in some right corners of the internet are just absolutely false. And the fact that some members of Congress are saying similar things is unfortunate and telling, Joshua.
One last thing, Leanne, we should remember that this was supposed to be a very boring day yesterday. The proceeding that Congress undertook can take a half hour or less to just read through the votes, say, is all of our arithmetic correct, sign off on it, and then be done. How did this riot impact the proceedings? They finally got it done in the wee hours of this morning.
Yeah. So it prolonged it. It delayed it for 7 hours almost. They had only gotten 30 minutes into this process before these rioters and mob broke through the Capitol and overwhelmed Capitol Police. That took, people were on lockdown. People were hurried away from the Capitol. So 7 hours later, they came back. Members of Congress on both sides of the aisle were determined to finish their work. And so we were expecting up to 6 objections in states for the electoral count vote. Instead, there was just 2, Joshua. So, Arizona was already happening. It was midway being debated. So they finished that one out. And then there was only a senator that joined in one other state, and that was Pennsylvania. But there was no debate in the Senate. It was shut down very, very quickly. The House, there was some debate. Of course, there was 130 members who voted for that objection, Republicans. But it did change this. It still made it last through the night, but it was altered. But the day of, this chaos and violence will just, obviously mark this for history.
Thank you, Leanne. That's NBC's Leanne Caldwell on Capitol Hill. Washington, D.C. remains under a state of emergency through Inauguration Day. Its mayor, Muriel Bowser, says that more unrest could come. We've had the view from inside the Capitol. Let's go out to the Capitol grounds and NBC's Ellison Barber, who joins us now. Ellison, what's it look like outside today?
Hey, Joshua, it's a lot quieter today, obviously, than it was yesterday evening. We have seen the perimeter in the area that is blocked off expand since we were out here this morning. This barricade right here, and since we were here last night, this barricade here, this is new. You can see there are state police here. They're from Virginia. You have U.S. Capitol Police here as well. U.S. Air Force a little more up here. Around the corner, you have members of the D.C. National Guard. There is a larger police military presence here today than we saw yesterday evening. The perimeter that was here when we were out this morning, it has expanded some to keep people who may still be here out of the way. You can see a little group of Trump supporters still here right now, but for the most part, things are calm. They are quiet with a very heavy military, National Guard, and police presence. Joshua?
Ellison, there are a number of so-called Stop the Steal protests planned around the country. These protests that are still built on this conspiracy theory that there was widespread fraud in the presidential election. Do we still expect those protests to continue, even though the president says at least that he supports a peaceful transition of power?
It's certainly possible. I mean, we spent the last 2 days talking to protesters who were attending these rallies. I actually want to play for you a little bit of what we heard from one protester who had come to the U.S. Capitol. I spoke to him about 30 minutes before everything turned chaotic here on the Capitol grounds. Listen to what he said.
What do you think happens after the Electoral College votes are counted here?
I think it's entirely possible that 1 million armed men show up here to fix the problem.
So when I stopped that man to talk to him, I was asking him about what he thought about Vice President Mike Pence's letter that had been sent to lawmakers saying that the vice president did not believe that he had unilateral authority to throw out or really intervene in the Electoral College vote count. He was adamant that he hoped violence, storming of what he said 1 million people, that didn't happen. But he was adamant that if the courts did not get involved and do something about what he believed to be widespread election fraud, that that's exactly what would happen. The people that we have talked to, Joshua, I don't know exactly how it looks from here on out. They have been adamant in saying that they do not feel like this is an isolated thing. They deeply believe that there is widespread, rampant fraud and issues, and they do not see this fight as one that ends in the coming days or necessarily in the coming weeks. Joshua?
Thank you, Ellison. That's NBC's Ellison Barber reporting from outside the Capitol. Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota helped usher her colleagues to safety during yesterday's riot. Here is how she described one particularly poignant moment, watching President-elect Biden denounce the violence.
At the point that Joe Biden gave his remarks, when the president had remained silent, hidden in the White House while he had incited this riot, everyone stopped and listened, including the most conservative Republicans, and were very, very respectful and listened to the entire speech of President-elect Biden. I thought that was actually a moment that I will never forget. And there was, of course, applause when he finished.
This afternoon, the president-elect plans to introduce his key nominees for the Justice Department. Those include Judge Merrick Garland, nominated to be the Attorney General. NBC's Mike Memoli joins us now from Wilmington, Delaware, where the president-elect will be speaking. Mike, that speech yesterday was originally supposed to be on the economy. Obviously, he changed direction as a result of what happened. He called on President Trump to publicly denounce the violence. That has not really happened. He gave us sort of a tepid denunciation at best. How is the incoming administration reacting today, particularly in terms of what we might hear from the president-elect today?
Well, Joshua, I think what we should look at in terms of today's announcement is an extension of what we saw yesterday. I think it is important to underscore just how strong the language we heard from the president-elect was, using, frankly, terms that I think we in the media were wary or careful about using to describe the scenes that were unfolding. He called it a siege. He called it an insurrection. He called it the work of extremists, and he said it borders on sedition. So a very clear opportunity that they had long envisioned for him to speak out if necessary, and it ended up being very necessary about the events unfolding on Capitol Hill. Now, it's also not a coincidence that today is the day in which he is announcing his team for the Justice Department. And one Biden official I was speaking to described it this way, which was, this was more than any other cabinet position, one that Biden perhaps cared the most about. He is a former chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He knows the most about the work of the Justice Department, since his committee was the one that oversaw the Justice Department. And he felt that really at the heart of what he believes the damage President Trump has done to this country has had to do with the rule of law. And so that's why choosing the right person and really choosing the right team was so important for him. And I think that's going to be conveyed today, not just announcing the personnel, but offering a message to the country that he is going to restore law and order, the rule of law, and independence to the Justice Department as president.
With regards to that, Mike, do you get any sense of how the incoming administration is viewing some of the calls to hold President Trump accountable for all of this? He didn't really suggest a precise course of action yesterday. I think it would have been too soon for him to do so as of the time that he gave that address. But there's been a little, daylight. People have had time to sleep on it. You've got more people saying, no, really, we should make an example of Donald Trump for this, even though you're trying to knit the country back together and try to cool things off. What is your sense of how the administration is going to walk that line?
Well, I think I can guarantee you, Joshua, that one of the questions reporters in the room today will be shouting out, we don't expect him to take questions, but certainly we'll try, is to ask him his view of the 25th Amendment. And even with such a short time frame between when he expects to be taking the baton from President Trump as the President of the United States, is it worth that process or Congress going through with impeachment? The reporting that we had myself along with Carol Lee in the early days of this transition was that Biden was reluctant to very clearly lay down any markers with regard to what should happen in terms of investigations of his predecessor and some of the decisions around him. The idea was that he did not want his administration to be consumed with everything around President Trump, and surely that would be the case. I think there might be some discussion internally now about especially given that a Democratic House, along with what is now going to be a Democratic Senate, might themselves be taking up a number of investigations, whether once he's established, as we expect to hear him do today, his view that this Justice Department, and that's why he's choosing a judge very specifically for that reason, is to send that message that perhaps this is the best venue for any sort of post-assessment of what we're seeing in the last few days, Joshua.
Thank you, Mike. That's NBC's Mike Memoli following the Biden transition team in Wilmington, Delaware. We've got much more just ahead. Stay close.
Everybody, welcome to Today. It is good to have you with us.
As we start a new year, we're right there with you to kick it off right.
Let's go 2021.
Stay healthy.
We're going to show you all the ways to keep calm and de-stress.
And stay connected every morning on Today.
I'll tell you what the American people's mandate is. Heal the nation. It's why he ran. That is why he won. How close to the breaking point is our hospital system? Why should we feel confident that vaccine distribution will go smoothly? If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
The coronavirus exploding to staggering President-elect Biden moves forward with his transition. What are your priorities going to be on those first days? With vaccinations ramping up.
How are you feeling? Incredibly optimistic that we're at this point.
NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news. Trucks carrying the first U.S. shipment of the coronavirus vaccine. Hope for a whole lot of people who have been waiting months and months. It's news made for your streaming world.
Are you ready?
A Monday boost?
Are you ready for a boost?
How'd you feel about that book?
We love those nurses. That was beautiful.
For breaking news in our changing world, download the NBC News app.
I didn't know, was my child dead? Is my child passed out?
I just kept saying, please be okay, please be okay.
You rush your child to the hospital.
A woman came in, normal clothes. We get down the hallway, and she closes the door. They were accusing me of child abuse.
And that's when the real nightmare begins.
Hey, calm down.
No, it's my children. I can't calm down.
Do No Harm. All 6 episodes, plus a special bonus episode, are available now. Subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts.
We have been living in perpetual grief. The incomprehensible loss of life, shuttered businesses, the fabric of civility ripped apart. We found solace in our heroes. And now finally, we see what hope looks like. Our worst year is over. Thanks to science, defeating the virus appears to be in reach. How we heal the wounds left behind will define how history remembers not just the virus, but us.
Even without yesterday's violence, this week would have been historic. NBC News projects that Democrats will retake control of the Senate after winning both runoffs in Georgia. They would control the Congress and the White House for the first time since 2011. NBC's Priscilla Thompson joins us now from Atlanta. And Priscilla, the celebrations for John Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock were cut short by the violence at the Capitol. How did these senators-elect shift their messaging as a result?
Well, Joshua, it's hard to believe that just a week ago, all eyes were on Georgia, given how quickly the news has changed. And these senator-elects certainly didn't get the celebration that they likely expected they would on the day when these races were called. As a matter of fact, John Ossoff's race was called as we were seeing those horrific pictures coming out of the state capitol. And we saw him tweeting yesterday, calling this a, quote, insurrectionist attack, saying that it was incited by Trump's poisonous lies and flagrant assault on our Constitution. Today, Reverend Raphael Warnock did a radio interview a little earlier today, and he said that this is not just the fault of the president, it is also the fault of all those who have enabled him. We heard Warnock name his opponent, Senator Kelly Loeffler, by name in that. And it said that this is, you know, a result of a number of politicians looking at their political ambitions for 2024 rather than what is best for the American people and uniting the country right now. So Joshua, very firm words for about this, but you talked about the historic nature of these elections, and I just want to underscore that. This is the first time in 20 years that the state of Georgia is going to send one Democratic senator, let alone two, to the Senate to represent them. Reverend Warnock will be the first black senator ever in the state of Georgia. John Ossoff, the first Jewish senator ever, and at 33 years old, also the youngest since Joe Biden. So certainly a historic election that, you know, that the celebration may be a bit delayed on, but I think when they are sworn in, there will be a moment to reflect on that in this election. Joshua?
Georgia Senator Kelly Loeffler, who we are projecting lost her bid for election, did not object to the results after the chaos yesterday. She had talked about possibly joining the Republican objection to the vote count of the Electoral College votes. Ultimately, she changed her course. Here's what she said on the Senate floor.
The events that have transpired today have forced me to reconsider, and I cannot now in good conscience object to the certification of these electors. The violence, the lawlessness, and siege of the halls of Congress are abhorrent and stand as a direct attack on the very institution my objection was intended to protect, the sanctity of the American democratic process.
Now, this is kind of remarkable.